Hi, this is Eric Blackman at Bedorium, and this is an overview of the construction bid solicitation process. I'm going to start by defining the stakeholders and highlight some of the challenges they face in this process. The first is the project owner. This is the person requesting the project and most likely the person who's going to pay for it. Next are the architects and engineers. These are the designers who develop the project plans and specifications. Prime contractors are third. They bid for the right to build the project and take responsibility for meeting the terms of the contract with the owner. The fourth stakeholder group are the trade contractors. They're hired by the prime contractor to deliver specialized tasks like framing, plumbing, or HVAC. And finally, there are the manufacturers and suppliers who provide the building materials. The bid solicitation process is made up of 5 phases that occur prior to breaking ground on a project. The first phase is feasibility, and in the residential space, this typically starts with the project owner who wants to build a home. The first step is to interview and hire an architect. Once selected, the owner and the architect collaborate on the project requirements. Now, during this back and forth, the architect provides the owner with high-level feasibility estimates. These estimates are usually based on some cost factor multiplied by the project's square footage. And if the owner and architect determine that it's feasible to proceed with the project, they start the design phase to create the project plans and specifications. The architect would typically sub out the design work for the structural, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing plans to engineers who specialize in those areas. Once the project plans are in hand, the next step is to solicit construction companies. Now, this marks the start of the estimation phase. The architect typically provides a consulting service to connect the owner with prime contractors. These contractors are given copies of the project plans to prepare their bids. During the estimation phase, each contractor combs through the plans and specifications in detail and produces what's called a quantity takeoff or a quantity survey. In short, the contractor quantifies all the materials associated with the project: the yards of foundation concrete, the number of wall studs, floor joists, roof rafters, all the windows, all the doors, fixtures. You get the picture. The contractor also quantifies all the labor and equipment needed to build the house. And when finished, the contractor applies pricing for each line item to develop a complete estimate for all the project tasks. Now, the contractor creates their bid from the estimate by adding a percentage to cover their overhead and their profit margin. In mid-sized projects, it may take 2 to 4 weeks to perform the estimate and finalize the bid. And just like it sounds, this activity is tedious and mostly manual. However, nailing the estimate is critical because the contractor's reputation, competitiveness, and profitability are at stake. So we have each construction firm preparing their bids based on their individual interpretation of the plans. And because of this, the bids they develop can vary widely. Now, this variance is often worsened when time constraints are imposed on the contractors to submit their bids. And this brings us from the preparation to the actual bidding phase. Now, because of the uncertainty faced during the estimation, contractors worry about their exposure to project scope and quantity omissions. So often, they'll inflate their final pricing to cover contingency costs before submitting their project bids. On the other hand, owners have their own financial constraints and expectations, and they tend to focus on obtaining the most competitive pricing and bid submission accuracy. So they will engage in price negotiations, often with the contractors as an exploratory tactic without any quantifiable basis. Now, this kind of gamesmanship continues throughout the bidding process. Well, the owner evaluates the bids and ultimately awards the contract to the construction company that best fits their criteria. And after winning the bid, the prime contractor starts the effort to acquire the trade contractors and resources needed to deliver the project. The project plans are again shared with trade contractors this time so that the trades can submit bids for their subcontracts. Now, this again requires the creation of quantity surveys, only this time is being done by the trade contractors for their specific areas. The prime contractors select the trades needed based on criteria such as availability, cost, and quality. However, often the decision is based on whether or not there's an existing working relationship between that prime and that particular trade. And this is particularly true if the prime contractor doesn't have the time to seek out new trade contractors who may offer better pricing for the same quality of service. Now, the bid solicitation process ends here, but oddly, manufacturers and suppliers are not engaged in the current process. Contractors make their estimates based on their own historical knowledge, or they use pricing guidebooks that contain national averages, but this can lead to budget overruns where actual supplier pricing exceeds their estimate. As it stands, the bid solicitation process and subsequent contract awards often result in suboptimal profit for the contractor and time and cost overruns for the owner. The overall construction bid solicitation process is primed for improvements. And Bedorium's target market segment represents $762 billion in construction procurement that's brokered by a bid acquisition process that's inefficient, full of distrust, and often fails to meet budget expectations. However, where problems exist, so do opportunities. In part 2 of this video series, I'll discuss how Bedorium's solution improves on this process for all the stakeholders.